let me introduce you to Jay Nath. Jay is the Chief Innovation Officer of the City of San Francisco. You met the other CIO, the Chief Information Officer, yesterday, John Walton. But Jay occupies a unique position, not only because he's the first Chief Innovation Officer for any city in North America, but because he brings multiple talents, the technology expertise, the social concerns, the economic development mandate, which the mayor is very intense about, and you'll hear later when the mayor is here why he's married innovation and economic development to social inclusion. So not to steal any more of Jay's thunder, Jay Nath, thank you.
Thank you, Gordon. First of all, I want to welcome all of you here, and I want to thank Cisco for selecting San Francisco as their city to host Meeting of the Minds. And want to encourage all of you to stay here through the weekend. We've got a lot of sporting events, as you know, happening, and some events around innovation that I'll be sharing with you in a few minutes. Before I talk about kind of bottoms-up innovation and the approach around smarter cities, I want to talk a little bit about the Office of Civic Innovation and why innovation is important in public institutions. From my standpoint, I think there's two primary reasons. One is that you really want an attach point. You want to signal to your community that there's a welcoming hand to really collaborate with. And second is you need a space for experimentation in cities. Government is built for continuity, sustainability. It's not really built for risk taking. You wouldn't want them to take risks. So having a sandbox where we can actually do some experimentation, take on high impact projects, and take on higher risk is really important. The slide's a little bit cut off here, but there's three areas that we're focused on. One is around public engagement, so really deepening and broadening civic engagement. The second is around economic development, as Gordon mentioned. That's a primary importance for our city. And third is making our city smarter, so driving efficiency through technology and methodologies. We launched in 2012, in the beginning of the year, and we did that very publicly through TechCrunch. And we did that for a reason. We wanted to signal that we exist and that, again, people can come to us. And we wanted to also publicly state what we're doing for 2012 so people have an insight and they can, again, collaborate with us about the different projects that we're working on and hold us accountable. So at the end of 2012, we're going to be producing an annual report about the work that we did, our successes and our failures, because I think innovation, really, you have to embrace those failures and learn from that to push things forward. This slide really got mangled, but we're really looking at a methodology around lean startup, and we've been inspired by Eric Ries. I had him speak to city staff, and that's been really pivotal in our thinking. Approaching things from a scientific basis to test our assumptions out, to be lean, to be scrappy is really important for us. We have a small team, just like a startup, and my Deputy Innovation Officer, Shannon Spinake, I think is hopefully the future of public service. She's a former CTO of a stealth startup, and it was founded on some patent-pending technologies around environmental sensors. We're blessed to have some really great partners in our ecosystem here in San Francisco. Code for America, many of you know, works closely with cities on year-long fellowships and through their Civic Accelerator program, driving innovation through through design and technology. Another organization you may not have heard of is SF City, San Francisco Citizens Initiative for Technology and Innovation. And they're really our tech chamber of commerce. They represent over 300 tech companies here in San Francisco, and they've been a great resource for our city. Some of the projects that I'm going to be mentioning have been pushed forward by them. And of course, Gray Area Foundation for the Arts, GAFTA, they're a digital arts collective that incubates digital and physical hacking in our cities. Last thing I'm going to talk about before I go into the heart of the presentation is that October is Innovation Month here in San Francisco. It seems like every month is Innovation Month here in San Francisco, but we wanted to celebrate individuals and companies and organizations that are doing outstanding work. And we kicked it off with a startup map that we launched at Disrupt San Francisco. And we used crowdsourced information, leveraging TechCrunch's Crunchbase API. And I don't know of any other city that's doing that. And we believe that's the better approach than a top-down approach, trying to manage all this data. Let's work with our community. We also have some anchor events that are happening throughout the city. So just want to mention that map was produced by GAFTA and Golightly House Media. OpenCo SF. This is the first year of OpenCo SF. It's starting today, and if you can make it, I encourage you to. Our mayor will be there, as well as Ron Conway and some other executives like the CEO of Twitter. Really what it's about is inviting 40 tech companies here in San Francisco to open up their doors, to really understand what makes them tick, so that people get a better insight about the people and the technologies that are driving these companies. Year 2, it's going to expand out beyond tech, but year 1, we're focused on high tech, and that's being produced by Federated Media and, again, Golightly House. And we have a party tonight. So we're launching Innovation Month at Westfield Center. It's right here in Union Square, and Westfield Labs is being announced there as well. And we're expecting 500 people. It's a great party. If you can attend, please do. You can sign up at innovatesf.com. So just to get to the heart of the discussion, I'm going to talk a little bit about a bottoms-up based approach for innovation in cities and thinking about how that compares to more of a planned-out, top-designed approach. We've seen a lot of disruption happening in social media and other industries over the past 10 years, knowledge management, journalism, software development. And if you think about it, there's some things that are common to these different industries and how they're being disrupted. One is that they're generative platforms. Each of these people can create. It's democratizing access and creation, and I think that's really, really important. And last is that it's near real time. People can make changes very quickly and iterate, and there aren't barriers to entry. So the question is, how do we start thinking about applying some of those lessons in these industries to cities? And what does that look like? Does that allow for co-creation so that everyone can participate? Is that even possible? And what would that look like? My sense is that, as we've seen in the internet, we're going to see the 1-9-90 rule kind of taking effect, where there's going to be 1% that are really creating things, 9% that are contributors, and 90% that are really just kind of consuming what people are doing. But I think what's important is that it's democratized, that anyone can be that 1%. It doesn't have to be the elite, the experts, that anyone can be part of that. So it's that choice. I'm going to talk a little bit about digital hacking and some of the lessons that we've learned here in San Francisco and see how we can potentially apply that to physical hacking in our cities. A big source of digital hacking is open data. We've heard yesterday from Chris and John about open data in San Francisco and across the country and internationally. We've been focused on the supply side for the past 3 years through DataSF. But what's more interesting is how do you incubate the demand side? And that's been through hackathons, community events, and really it's been a feedback loop for our city to uncover where we should be going next. But I think what's really interesting is private sector data. If you look at telco data, if you look at taxi data, it's locked and inaccessible. But what happens if we had a marketplace, a data marketplace, where we could actually use all of that information and be agnostic to where the source of that data is coming from? I think we could have a lot more insights into what's happening in cities and to benefit everyone. So we're going to be making some announcements around this on Monday with our mayor, President Chu, and some leadership in our city around open data. We're reclaiming leadership. We're going to be talking about private data and a lot more on Monday. So if you're here in San Francisco, please join us at the Hatchery on Monday. So with that data, in 2009, 2010, we partnered with GAFTA on something called Summer of Smart, which was a series of hackathons. And it was really a learning exercise for us. It was a way for us to start ideating with our community. And here's a video that kind of goes into it. Facebook and Twitter, they have an ecosystem. We're trying to build that same platform for government. Hopefully we're developing an urban operating system.
And we kind of realized there needed to be a dialogue between people out to do interesting things and folks who are running the city.
When you're looking at civic applications, think What is the one thing you want people to do, and design your application around that.
The answers are not all technology, they're not all about data. Some of them are about marketing and about advocacy and about art and about inspiration. And bringing people from different disciplines together is how we're actually going to solve tough problems in the city.
We have the tools to bring people together in brand new ways.
The very fact that so many people are involved is just an amazing testament to what we're up to, and it's cool that we've got the city looking at us.
So we had over 500 participants, 10,000 hours of civic engagement, and 25 apps created. I think the one thing to note here is that the engagement was not just people just participating, showing up, but they were actually networking, deeply thinking about how to solve the challenges that were put forth. One of the outcomes was an app called Smart Muni, and what I think is interesting about this app, is that it actually goes a bit deeper. It's not just a consumer-facing, citizen-facing app. It's actually used for operations. And we had some troubles, but it's now being implemented in San Francisco, so it helps our transit planners actually do real-time planning on the ground. So we'll be seeing that coming from a hackathon to actually being instituted in our city. We also took this to the political class, so we have had this kind of bottoms-up kind of insurgency, but how do we actually educate and enroll the political class? And we did that through their debate, 16 mayoral candidates. For the first time, they learned that their constituents were not just a feedback mechanism, but actually could create solutions as well. That was really inspiring for them. We had another hackathon, it's called an Unhackathon, where we focused on design thinking around the taxi space, and it was really about blueprints, not actual technology. We're actually taking many of these ideas for regulatory changes. 2 ideas were stolen by a taxi company here locally, a startup, and we want people to steal ideas. It's a good thing. The last one I'm going to mention is Creative Currency, and it was a partnership, again, with GAFTA, the Hub, and American Express, and it was exploring deeply about creative currency and the new economy in one of our poorer districts here in San Francisco. And the idea of the 4 ideas that were selected and incubated and kind of seeded, this one is really interesting. It's taking idle spaces in retail areas, combining them with people who are underemployed, and transforming the space through new novel ideas. So here's a quick video on that. Hopefully it'll play, and it won't play. Let's try that again. Can you see if we can try hitting play on that? And it doesn't want to play. Okay. The other mechanism that we've been using to drive change is through challenges, really working with our constituents. And challenges have a long history in government, but it's taking kind of a new emphasis at the federal level, and we're doing some work here at the local level through Improve SF, which I'll have the mayor talk about if this video actually works.
I'm Mayor Ed Lee, and I want to welcome you to Improve SF. Improve SF is an online brainstorming platform where we reward you for working with us to solve our city's most challenging problems. On this website, city agencies will post challenges, and you can submit ideas about how to solve them. Through the years, our work in open data and hackathons has taught us 3 important lessons: that innovation is disruptive, solutions can come from anywhere, and collaboration is key. Improve SF combines those lessons and embraces the power of technology to make it easier for you to communicate and collaborate with city government to solve problems from home, from work, or from anywhere with internet
So
access.
our first challenge was around the transportation agency. And here's a video kind of describing what we were trying to look for in the transportation space. And so the first challenge was a great success. Transportation is something that people are very passionate about. Our second challenge went deeper. It was about access to fresh, healthy food and food justice in Central Market. We had 85 ideas. The winning idea came from students at Berkeley. And we took those ideas and incubated them at the hub. So we're going to see how we take those ideas to market. And that's really critical. We don't want a platform where we generate ideas and they go into a black hole. We want to ensure that those ideas are actually implemented and they're solving real problems. We're also looking at international challenges. So we've worked with Living Labs Global for the past 2 years. And the last challenge was around lighting. And how do we do intelligent lighting in San Francisco? It's a $20 million capital program in our city, and they've had 2 failed RFPs. And so really it's thinking about what is another mechanism for RFPs, and challenges are a great way to do that. The winning solution is from Paradox Engineering. They're a company from Switzerland. The CEO flew in from Switzerland. I want to recognize them. Gianni, if you want to stand up for a second. Over there. Thank you for flying in. And their solution is really interesting. It's really future-proof. It's really dedicated to open standards, interoperability, and that's something important for San Francisco, and I think for cities in general, to think about open standards. If you want to learn more about their technology, I'll do a shame in trying to represent their technology, but I think it meets our needs for currently and also for the future in thinking about a wireless mesh network and how we control lighting and other technologies in our city. So moving to physical hacking a little bit, we've explored digital hacking and some of the lessons learned there, which is about prototyping, iterating quickly, democratizing access so that people can create things very quickly. Can we do the same thing on the physical side? And what does that look like in our public realm? A great example of that is Urban Prototyping Festival. It's a festival that's being launched here in San Francisco next week, and it's really exploring real interventions on the digital and physical side in our environment. And what does that look like? And one of the examples that I like is something called the 10 Mile Garden. It's an idea from a professor here at the Architecture School of California College of the Arts, Mona. And her idea is looking at the unused spaces in front of fire hydrants. And can we rethink what that space looks like into gardens? And if you actually aggregate all of those spaces across our city, that adds up to 10 miles. So it can have a big impact on our environment. Now what's interesting is that her idea, she shared this with me several months ago, but through this festival, we're actually able to surface this idea in a much broader way. And I think what's interesting here with the Urban Prototyping Festival for our city is that they're creating tension points. They're going to be doing a lot of physical hacking through the festival permit. And we're going to look at those tension points and think about what kind of regulatory changes can we make on the permitting side. And for me, I'm seeing permits as the new API for making change in our urban environment. One of the other disruptive things that we've seen on the physical side is access to physical assets. There's been a culture of ownership, of this inevitability of continuing to build more freeways and et cetera, et cetera. But it's a really profound idea of sharing physical assets. And we're the center of this here in San Francisco. And I think what also is interesting is that we're unfolding and unteasing the tension points between the legacy industries and the new emerging industries that are at play here. No other city is doing that. We have a working group announced by the mayor that's actively working on both sides to craft better policies. We don't want to be reactive. As you saw at the state, some of you saw that the CPUC actually made it illegal for Sidecar and other cars like Zimride and Lyft to actually work. And we think that we should be a lot more thoughtful about this. We shouldn't just be rushing in being reactive and just applying old models to new spaces. I want to leave things off with the Bay Lights. Many of you heard about this. When I met Ben Davis, the mastermind behind the Bay Lights, I was awed by the scale and the audacity of what he wanted to accomplish. But what I was really impressed with is I knew he was going to succeed a year ago. And the reason is that he had tackled the most difficult part, which was getting the regulatory environment, MTC, the Coast Guard, and others to buy into this crazy idea to make a bridge a digital canvas. And he's able to do that. And when I heard about that, the other challenge of getting $8 million in crowdfunding, I thought was, that was going to be a home run. He got the $8 million, he got the okay from all of these different regulatory environments, and this is expected to pull in $100 million into our local economy. And I think what's really interesting here is that this is bottoms up. that great cities are created by great people. And we, as government, need to create a space for the entrepreneurs, the artists, the innovators to explore, to use their creativity and intellect to push things forward. Thank you.
We've got 5 minutes for questions.
Oh, okay.
So, first question. Who's it going to be?
Peter.
With the microphone, Peter. Thank you. Introduce yourself.
Hi, Peter Hirschberg. I'm chairman of Gray Area Foundation for the Arts. I'd love you to talk a little bit about how some of this prototyping stuff interfaces with the more formal aspects of city planning and architecture, and how kind of the bottom-up stuff informs some of the top-down, very traditional things and how they work together.
Well, I think we're at the initial stages of that. So the Urban Prototyping Festival, we have our director of planning there, and we have city leadership there, really, again, learning about this, getting enrolled about what does this space look like? Who are these hackers? What are they doing? And demystifying the work that they're doing, because right now I think there's this guerrilla aspect that's in their mindset. So I think it's enrolling, education, and seeing that their goals are aligned with our city's agencies and our collective goal of making our city more vibrant.
Another question. Good, I get to ask one. So there are obstacles in the bureaucratic system. Not every agency who says they're innovative really, truly, in their heart of hearts, wants to be innovative, especially if it's not invented here. So what's the guerrilla strategy for getting agencies that might be resistant to willingly embrace innovation that sounds maybe not top of mind priority for a bureaucratic manager?
I think it's a great question. I mean, when you have a large organization like our city, we have 25,000 employees. We're the largest employer in San Francisco. And so thinking about scaling innovation from a small group across the city, one of the things that we're looking at is reaching out to the early adopters, the people who are already like-minded. I'm not going to start with the people who are, really recalcitrant and aren't thinking openly. So we're working with people like our transportation director, our planning director, and others who understand that innovation is important. We're partnering with Code for America and their fellowship program in 2013 around human services and access to human services. So it's finding those early adopters and then demonstrating real clear value around some of this innovation work. As an example, Open Data, when I launched that 3 years ago, I almost lost my job, and there was just a lot of problems with it. And I don't say that lightly. I actually did almost lose my job. And 3 years since then, there's been a sea change in perception, and more people understand what open data is in our city, and they're really supportive. So for me, yeah, 3 years is a long time, but in city time, that's actually pretty quick.
One last question. Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Joel Oliker. You mentioned private data and accessing that. I know companies see private data as a revenue source and a business, and also are extremely protective of it. How do you see utilizing such a private resource?
It's a great question. We're going to be unfolding what those mechanics are, what the incentive model is for private companies. I think there's a couple of things there. One is a freemium model. So they'll maybe share a smaller subset, or the granularity of the data set might be changed a bit. We're working, for example, with a company called MotionLoft. They're a startup here in San Francisco that's doing real-time sensing of pedestrian traffic flow. And they're sharing that data with the public. They will be actually on Monday when they announce it. And what's interesting is that they're not sharing at the granular level, at the individual level. They're sharing at a little bit more macroscopic. But it's enough for people to understand where crowds are in our city over time. So that's of real value. But if you want to get more detail, yeah, you need to pay for it. But I think that freemium model is a great model to leverage. There's also data philanthropy. I think that people recognize that if we share this data set, telcos do it, for example, with academia, that people can actually use that to do analysis that they may not have the capacity or the skill sets within their company. So we're going to be teasing that apart to understand what are those motivations for companies to do that. And we're going to start here in San Francisco, but we want academia, nonprofits, and private companies to start sharing data. And we already have a few commitments in place.
Jay, thank you so much. We're going to wish you all the best. Jay's having a